Hi, welcome to Planetary Calendars, Astro Portraits. I'm Ralph Dimitrios, one of the astrologers. The portrait this week was suggested by one of our viewers for our music series, Celine Dion. Born March 30th, 1968, at 12:15 p.m. in Charlemagne, Canada. I just had to say that, Charlemagne, Canada. It just sounds thoroughly charming. I'm sure it's some little town way up in the hills. Before I get started, I wanted to say, please remember to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. We do these portraits every Tuesday. We do our forecast every Friday for the coming week. You'll get both of them. If you push that little bell, you'll get reminded when the forecasts come up. But it's a big help to us when you subscribe. And besides, you want to know what's going on, right? So let's look at Celine's chart. She is an Aries. And she's not just an Aries, okay? She has the Sun, Saturn, and the Moon in Aries. Now, the Sun is at 10 degrees, so relatively early in the sign. The Moon is at the last degree of the sign. This is technically what would be called a void of course moon, which is not considered strong. It means the person's kind of lost direction. But this is in the very last degree. And many times when a planet is in the last degree, it's the super version of that sign. So this is a very strong moon that at the same time is very sensitive to the people around you. Because that's one thing about the void of course moon. It's very sensitive to how the currents change because it's not as self-directed as a moon that's earlier on in the sign. Because the moon earlier on the sign is always going to be making another aspect with another planet. So it's kind of saying, well, who's my next appointment with? So I'm going to become who I need to be for that appointment. But with the void of course moon, it's different. It's like I've made my last appointment. Maybe I'll go shopping. And so it's very subject to being sensitive to other people around them and such, which is not a bad thing for an artist. What's interesting is right out of sign at 2 degrees Taurus is Mars. So she has a highly elevated Mars at 2 degrees Taurus. Taurus, of course, is what? The voice. It's music. It's highly elevated in the chart. So it shows a tremendous amount of physical endurance. The Mars in Taurus is a very strong position in terms of endurance. And it puts a lot of energy in, of course, the voice. Something you might want to have if you're a singer. What's really interesting is with this collection of planets in Aries in the 9th house, with the midheaven and the North Node. So the midheaven is right there, which means career. But a lot of what it was about for her in career was getting away from the town where she was born. It's the 9th house. It's long distance travel. It's about expanding her horizons. And that's what's really remarkable about Celine Dion. And you find this, like, for instance, with Rihanna. These are people who came from very remote places and rose to great achievement, entirely upon their talents and the connections they made. And the connections she made were very important. How do we know that? Because conjunct the midheaven at 14 degrees Aries is Saturn at 14 degrees Aries. It shows connection with an older man, a very strong personality. Saturn is the older man. It's an Aries, so it's a man. It's a fire sign. It's a very individual, highly energetic person. So in seeking her career, she would seek someone out like that, but also this is her own primal drive to be successful. Okay, it's 4 degrees away from her sun. She had a very strong desire to rise up and be successful from very early on. The North Node is there, which means it fed her emotionally. It fed her soul to do this. And then the Moon was there, which meant that she was continually in emotional connection with it and adapted to the situation because it was an Aries. Aries is a very adaptable sign. It's the newborn. It adapts to the situation. It gets carried along sometimes. Babies get carried a lot. They adapt to the situation. They have a core personality, but they adapt. The rising is Leo. It's funny, we've just done the portrait for Adam Levine, who also has a Leo rising, and I was saying how Leo rising is a great position for a performer because they love being on stage. They don't tend to get the stage fright that many people get. They like going in front of people. They love the applause. They like sharing. She also has Jupiter in the first house at 26 degrees Leo, conjunct the part of fortune, the place where she makes her money. So performing has been a major portion of how she's made her money, being on stage. Now, of course, the first house and the ninth house are 120 degrees away, right? It's a natural trine. It's the most supportive aspect you can have. Jupiter is trine within 3 degrees that moon. Now, this is significant because Jupiter and the moon have a natural connection. Jupiter is exalted, the best friend sign, in Cancer. So Jupiter and the moon, if you think of kind of the moon as being the queen, Jupiter would be her uncle, the bishop, or the cardinal. You know, he lives in another place, but he loves his niece. So there's that natural connection that goes on between these two. There's a familial connection. So when you have a trine between the moon and Jupiter, it tends to be very strong. It's in Leo, late in the sign, 26 degrees, so relatively close to Regulus, the royal star, not right on it, which is something you see a lot in performers where there's a lot of performers born right at the last degree of Leo or first degree of Virgo, where their sun is right on Regulus. But that's not the only thing that's going on between these two houses, because the sun at 10 degrees is trining the ascendant at 2 degrees. So the ascendant is being supported powerfully by the sun. This is once again also very important. Why? The sun rises in the east. The ascendant is the rising point. But also the ascendant in the first house is controlled by whom? Aries. What is the sun's exalted sign? Aries. That's because Aries is like the sun's favorite child or favorite son. So when you have the sun trining the ascendant, it tends to be very strong as well. So here you have Jupiter and the moon, a familial relationship, the sun and the rising, a familial relationship. There's parts about her experience that where she's really felt like her work, her expansion into her career was like making new family or establishing a family. And of course, she was discovered by an older man, a producer, who then she went on later to marry. Became her family. So you see this very strong connection. So without that connection, her career would not have prospered. But that need to have that connection was part of her motive force. Okay? These are not the only things going on in the chart, of course. I mean, these are not the only things going on in the chart. She also has the almost required water that you have to find in musicians' charts. As we've been doing these charts, it's amazing how much water shows up. In the 8th house, she has Mercury and Venus conjunct, same degree, at 18 degrees Pisces. Now, Venus in the 8th house is not a strong house for either Venus or Mercury, but Venus is in its exalted sign. The exalted sign is what? The best friend sign. And it's conjunct Mercury. Now, Mercury is also dignified in Pisces, but in a different way. It's actually considered the detriment position. It's an introvert position. Okay? So the Venus is in an extrovert position. The Mercury is in an introvert position in the 8th house. It adds a certain allure to her personality. Venus in Pisces it's very romantic. It's very imaginative. And the Mercury being there, it's very imaginative. Okay? The fact that the Mercury is not strong in that position is overcome, or it's given a voice by the Mercury or the Venus in Pisces. Why? Because the Venus is extrovert. So the Mercury is very imaginative, very romantic. You know, it's very girly in that kind of way of, a girl's imagination about romance. The Venus allows it to be expressed. Why? Because when you have a planet in detriment or fall, which are the introvert positions, but they're conjunct a planet in rulership or exaltation, it's a lot like you traveling to another country, right? And you're going to stay with your cousin. And you're a nice looking kid, And if you're a boy, it's your boy cousin, or if it's a girl, it's your girl cousin. But you don't know the language where you're going. But guess what? Your cousin is real cute too, and they know the language, and they know everybody, and so they become your spokesman. And now you become more interesting because you're from a foreign land, and they become your translator. So here you're continually engaged in this three-part conversation anytime you want to flirt with someone or meet someone. So you become much more interesting. So when you get these two together in different dignities, in Pisces, the planet, the sign of imagination and of musicianship and dreaming together in the 8th house, that's pretty powerful. And then you have Vesta there, right? This would be a perfect position for a poet. But the Vesta there means it turns into a mission. She could have been someone like Sappho, the great Greek poet who wrote love poetry. And it would be a mission to her because Vesta's there in Pisces. So imagination became her mission. And managing, it's 8th house, managing the collective imagination of a group is part of her mission. Chiron is there late in the sign, which means she has studied this. She's also been wounded in certain ways by this, by her imagination, but she's learned how to manage it. She's learned how to teach it. So it's a really unique skill, which for a singer, someone who's having to tell a story, is so, so important. So here you have this tremendously strong Aries personality with this tremendous ability to manage the imagination. It's thoroughly cool. And then she has the Mars in Taurus, the ability to keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up. It's up in the 10th house. What's funny is that the dominant things in her chart are up. They're primarily up. I mean, she has the Jupiter in the 1st house, late in the sign. She's got Pluto and Uranus in the 2nd house. She's got Neptune in the 4th house with Juno and Ceres. The thing about it is that of those outer planets, Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune, you can't see them without a telescope. They're not obvious parts of your life. Uranus will show up sometimes physically in people, like people of Uranus rising, sometimes they will have unusual look to them in some way or the other. The other planets you just don't see. They can't, if you can't see them without a telescope, they don't show up in your life. They're there, but they're hidden elements. The Jupiter rising, where it was, with that strong Aries, is one of the reasons why she was successful or came to light very young. This is actually very similar to a configuration in Taylor Swift's chart, another person who came to fame very young. That Jupiter early on, very young they come to it. Very early on they're identified as being, standout. Okay? But these other planets, they're very hidden. So there's a lot of complexity in her personality that is hiding beneath the surface. Pretty much what you see in the world, the upper section is what you get. That's who she is. She's a dynamic, extrovert personality who believes in poetry, who believes in imagination, who basically has worked very hard to expand the horizons of her life, to learn a great deal. She's learned a great deal in the process. And the need to be on stage, is core to how she's made her living. She's recognized early on that she's going to have to achieve. And she found that the way she could achieve was by being on stage. And that's the reality of her life. Remember, she has Saturn very close to her sun in Aries. Saturn is a detriment position, or actually a fall position for Saturn. It's an introvert position. Her husband has been behind the scenes. That's the thing about these introvert positions, the detriments and the fall. They act behind the scenes. They're not obvious at the front. The the rulership and exaltation. They exist out in the world. You see them out there, and they act out in the world. So that Saturn's been behind the scenes. Her ambition is behind the scenes, but it's there. But that Saturn there, close to the sun, makes her a tremendously hard worker. She will just work and work and work to exhaustion. Very, very easy. I know recently she canceled a tour because she was getting horrible spasms, probably cramps. Stuff like that will oftentimes happen with mineral deficiencies. And it comes from working very, very, very hard. You just blow through all your minerals. She has Capricorn in the 6th house. Capricorn are the minerals, the bones in the body. The 6th house is health. When problems tend to arise in her health, it oftentimes comes down to minerals, to the hard stuff. Not the soft tissue, the hard tissue. She probably blew through all of her minerals and just never got them back enough. Maybe she was losing weight and she was working out. She was doing a lot of exercise and then doing a great deal of singing and performing. She's getting a little bit older now. She's born in 1968. She's in her 50s now. At that age, she's coming up, she's at that point where you don't absorb minerals as easily. And next thing you know, she's getting this whole series of spasms that are coming from a lack of minerals. We all have to deal with our particular strengths and weaknesses. But she has such great strengths and a great deal of talent and a very, very strong personality and a very talented artist. So that's Celine Dion, a fascinating chart. Thank you for the viewer who recommended her. I looked at the chart and I thought, oh my gosh, this is like a perfect example. One thing that she does not have, which is does not have, that we find many times with very successful people, is a prominently placed Uranus. It's conjunct her Pluto. She's part of that generation, 67, 68, and then when Pluto and Uranus were conjunct in Virgo. It is opposite her Chiron, and it's quincunx her moon. But it's not in a place of angularity, at the rising, the setting, the IC, the MC. It's not in one of those spots. So it's when you get by her, she doesn't just get excite you, you might say. Instead, I think it's the Jupiter that just says to you, the expansiveness of her personality. She just kind of fills all the, she's one of these people that, takes all the air out of the room when she shows up. She just has one of those big, expansive personalities. And the people around her have contributed to that. They've supported that. So, like I said, a fascinating chart, Celine Dion. Very much in Aries. So, until next time, remember, please visit us at Planetary Calendar Astrology on YouTube and subscribe. Remember, we do these portraits. Right now we're in the music series. We do those every Tuesday. We put them up. We put the forecasts up every Friday for the coming week. When you subscribe, push that little bell. You'll get reminded about the forecast so you know when they're coming up. If you do not have your planetary calendar, whatever year you're buying this, whatever year you need it, you can find that at planetarycalendar.com. So until next time, be well.